Welcome to the Accounting for Innovation podcast, where we explore cutting-edge strategies and insights into the worlds of accounting and finance. Presented by Decimal and the Radical CPA, each episode dives deep into industry trends. Whether you're a seasoned professional or a budding entrepreneur, join us as we unpack key concepts and share practical tips to drive success. Welcome to season 2, where we're going to kick off this season talking about M&A.
Jody, I think this is going to be an exciting conversation. Not only the whole season, but as you and I know, acquisitions, PE, M&A is a huge topic. So we're going to start with, I think, is a fascinating story of you and your firm getting acquired and the process that you ran. So looking at it from the seller of a firm perspective. Second episode, we'll talk about it more from the Decimal perspective. It's a company that's done 2 acquisitions. We'll look at the buyer side. And I think that's going to give us a good, well-rounded perspective on M&A in the accounting industry. I think one of the hottest topics in all of accounting, from the biggest firms to the smallest firms right now, is mergers and acquisitions. Whether it's private equity or firms merging to avoid private equity, people want to know what it's like to buy, what it's like to sell their firm. And that's why I'm excited today to start with the seller perspective. For people that are thinking about selling their firm or considering the possibility, there's a lot to learn from your story about selling your firm. So before we start, give us a little bit of the brief overview and background of your firm and what made you start to think about wanting to get acquired.
Okay, so first I'm going to set the stage in that this is kind of emotional for me, Matt. Like when people think about selling, it really is, I don't want to say your baby because it's not a baby, but it's your heart's, it's your heart. And so when you think about even selling, which I think is totally lost out of most M&A conversations, everyone forgets about the blood, sweat, and tears that someone put into building the firm before it gets merged or acquired. So I think that's one unique thing that I want to bring to the conversation that nobody ever talks about. It's the heart that goes into what it means to sell your firm and how it affects your life. So to back up, so I built, I would say, the firm of the future in 2010. Now, it took me many years to get it to where it was, but when everyone talks about this firm of the future, I was like, yeah, I invented it. And it sounds kind of like, ego-driven, but it kind of really was, right? There were a handful of us at the time who were innovating and iterating through what it meant to have a cloud-based firm, to use social media to get customers, to really focus on a client experience, and to start pricing upfront and without billing by the hour. And in 2010, that was unheard of. Everyone told me I was nuts, hence my title, the Radical CPA. And now everybody's copying it, right? Like so somehow the tune changed. But come 2018, now mind you too, I had built it, I had iterated through it. Around 2006, 7, I had started my firm, but I was still working as a contractor in someone else's firm because I hadn't gone all in, because I was a little bit nervous of saying, okay, I can trust myself. Looking back, I would say I probably should have jumped all in sooner. I also joined my dad's firm, which at the time had a $50,000 book of business that was 1040. So it was really immaterial in the whole scheme of things. And when I joined him, he said, go find your own clients. So it was truly me who built the book. Now, I started using new technologies, and I would say around 2010 is when I really started realizing that cloud technology would fundamentally change how my firm would operate. And, fast forward by 2015, it had a really solid base. We were going like crazy. And it was funny too, because this was in the financial, even remember 2008, 2009, when all the financial was happening, that was when I was growing the fastest. So I had everyone was saying, oh, we're in a recession. Really, nobody told me about it. So I was growing the fastest because people were buying what I had to sell, right? They liked the product market fit that I had determined. So anyways, fast forward, by 2015, I had written my first book, and I had started to work more outside of my firm than inside of my firm. My partner was really doing all the day-to-day. And I was just kind of I was around, but I wasn't really in my firm. I had already kind of worked myself out of my firm. And by 2018, top 100 firms started to court me. So they really started calling up and saying, "Hey, Jody, we want to build a CAS practice. We love your firm. We want you to be part of our firm." And when one suitor kind of reached out, I was like, "Okay, what am I going to do?" And because of my status in the industry and because I knew everybody, I called Joel Sinkin, who I love dearly, and I said, "Okay, like, they're interested, what do I do?" And he said, "Okay," right? And he said, "Let's see if there's a way we can, you know, position me for sale," right? So basically kind of it's like calling your realtor for all intents.
Oh,
I
100%.
gotta get my house in order, right? Like now, and they go through and they say, "Okay, you gotta paint this room." And so he kind of got me in the mindset of, okay, I need to like kind of figure out what that looked like. It meant transitioning from an S corp to an LLC and kind of organizing my book so it was ready for sale and kind of doing, I'll say, a little bit of housekeeping on the back end. And then I started talking to suitors, right? So essentially managing partners of all these top 100 firms would call and they would have this like half-hour interview call where they're basically, I'd say dating, right? They're basically interviewing
No,
you and
yeah.
you're interviewing them and you're seeing if you can align. And the more calls that I had, the more frustrated I got. And the
Why?
more because I knew I would never fit. I knew that I would just be eaten by this firm, and the beautiful thing that I had built would never go across the firm, like, that I wouldn't have the power inside a big firm like that to actually change, even though that's what the managing partner said. They said, "Oh, well, we want you to teach us," but I knew, like, that it probably wouldn't happen. And I started actually having a longer conversation with a firm that I won't name. And we were talking. I flew down to meet them. I met a bunch of their partners. They were courting me as much as, and they were top 50 at the time. Now I think they're like 25 or top, they might even be higher than that. And they were courting me just as much, right? Like we kind of got to that next level and I thought, okay, maybe I can fit in here. Like maybe this firm is innovative enough that even if my firm isn't completely the same, like we could live here, right? Like we could
Yeah.
cohabitate together. And we got all the way to the end and basically they pulled the deal at the end. And
Mm,
I thought that I was going to have like I not to say I was like a deal's never done until it's done, but
right.
I thought that like this is where we were going to land. And what was interesting for me too is I had a small team, so I only had 2.5 full-time equivalents working for me. So my partner knew what was happening and my part-time person knew what was happening. The only person who didn't know what was happening in the firm was the admin. So when you think about which is kind of funny too, because when you think about the trust that has to happen, those conversations, a lot of times nobody knows what's going on until the very end. They were involved in it from the very beginning and they knew their lives would fundamentally change. So, anyways, it's kind of funny because the the partner pulled the deal and in the meantime, I had engaged with one of my dear friends, Bill Paroli, who was the past chair of the AI CPA, to kind of walk me through this because he
Mhm.
had done a bunch of M&A with other firms. I wanted not to be taken advantage of. When you're a small firm
Yeah.
and, my book was around 700, right? And you have these top 100 firms like courting you and they have a different level of expertise in M&A, they have a different level like, your biggest fear is that you're gonna be taken advantage of,
Mm,
and so I wanted someone on my team. Well, who better to that now, like, yeah, gee, I have the past chair of the AICPA who's on my
not
team.
bad.
Me yeah, so never be like, the power of the network is amazing, right? To have someone like that on your team. But anyway, so that deal got pulled, and in the meantime, I was doing a lot of consulting with technology companies, which is kind of where my focus had been and not really on my firm because my partner was pretty much running my firm, completely by itself, and I was not really in it at all, other than I, like, came to the office every day.
Yeah.
And then I started to work with BotKeeper as a consultant and really helping them kind of in the go-to-market side, and I kind of fell in love with the tech world and working in technology and working with CPAs, and because my market of my social media presence, I was like, "Okay, actually, here's a really good value for me, and this is where I can bring something to the table." And so the conversations got deeper with BotKeeper. And at that point in time, BotKeeper was still serving regular businesses as well. They weren't only focused on the accountant market, even though like I knew that that was going to be kind
Where
of the
they were
shift.
going.
Yeah. And so Enrico and I, came to the decision, hey, if you buy my firm, then and become part of the leadership team at BotKeeper, and we're going to sell to accounting professionals. And for me, it matched my why of being able to bring more tech innovation to firms and kind of keep talking about all the stuff that I've talked about for the last year and still talk about, right? Like this is still my
Yeah.
why is like, how do you bring innovation into the accounting firm? And so anyway, so we got to that point and we said, okay, now we're going to go through like a sale because we aligned on something, right? Like, and I think that's the big thing is like, you really have to align with who you're merging with, who you're buying with. If there's no alignment of values, forget it. The deal's not going to work. The deal's going to fall apart. Like, and I think when I hear some of these M&A guys talk, they forget that they're people. Like
Oh,
at
yeah.
the end of the day, accounting firms are made up of people and people have values and wants and needs, and not all of them are in it for the best price. Some of it is about like anything else. Like you want it, like, yes, you want a fair price for your book, but you want to be aligned with the person who you're moving in with because like hello, like this is where you're going to be long term and you have to make sure your team can stay there because if your team doesn't stay and they quit on you, well, you only get paid out now. I won't talk about my deals, but I got paid out a lot quicker than other firms. But if
Right.
your clients don't stay, you don't get paid out. So it's in your best interest to make sure that your firm fits, your team fits, and everybody kind of fits from a values perspective first. And then the work is the work, right? Like, but how do you align there first?
Well, and I think there are three main themes that I'm taking from your story that I think are really important for people to internalize. Number one is find a good advisor. And if you don't have one that you trust in your network, same as you did with other firms, interview people to be advisors and find one that you trust and that you like. Number two is focus on the people. It is an emotional decision and make sure you treat it as such. There's also the practical side of the money and all of that stuff, but there is a philosophical alignment that you want to find a place where you and your team will fit. Because as you mentioned, there are earnouts that come with it. You will be there for a while. Your team will be there for a while, and you need to make sure it's a place you're comfortable. And you and I have both heard stories of people that sold and there was no philosophical alignment and it was an implosion. It implodes every time and it hurts everybody. But the third thing that I think you mentioned earliest on, and I want to unpack it first, is you mentioned I needed to do some cleanup. And it's something that I talk a lot about when I talk to people about acquisitions in the space is you should always build your firm as if you're going to sell it. The reason being you will establish the right economics so that you will get the best outcome. Because we've all seen where it's like, oh, I need to clean up this billing, or I need to do a little bit here, need to tweak this, or whatever it is, you start to lessen the potential outcome for yourself if you haven't built it in a way that puts it in the position to sell. Is that a good kind of summarization of your
Yeah,
lessons?
I think that's a really good summary, and I think the cleanup part was important, right? And you have to and when they started courting me, I wasn't thinking about selling. Like
Right.
it came out of the blue. I thought, and the other thing is my partner was my dad. So when you think about family business and family financial, like again, like that's what you're looking at, right? And now you have
Yeah.
to clean it up because someone else is looking at it as well. And I think that's important to like that you should get ready for sale and you should think about. The other thing that was very unique to me as all these firms were looking at me is my P&L looked very different than their P&Ls. They didn't know how to compare them. When the top 100 firms were looking at me, yes, they could look at like the net profitability, but they were like, "Why are your technology costs so high?" I'm like, "Cuz I don't have any labor."
Right.
Like, but
Why are your
but
labor costs so high?
and they were like, "Wait, wait, wait, like what do I do?" "Hello, your accountant. What's your" but
Well, I
you
think
don't
there's
fit into this like
mo
this mold. They're like, oh my gosh, now what do we do?
but I do think you're seeing it more and more, and I think what you did was atypical at the time, but it's becoming a lot more typical. What I find is very ironic, and this is probably what needs to change the fastest, is a lot of accounting firms don't have the same level of detailed work put into their own financials that they put into their clients' financials, and pretending that there was an outsider looking in. And so I think that's a big part of it. Then, so let's continue to unpack. We've unpacked the financials, built as if you're going to sell, put financial packages together for your firm that you look at every week or every month, however often, that are the same, put together the same diligence as you put together your clients. But then advisory. How do people go about and find, they don't have the network that you do, that they aren't the Radical CPA. How do they find the right trustworthy advisor?
So I think the reason my advisor worked for me is I had Joel Sinkin, who was like kind of an M&A guy, right? Like, and he was, and there's a few of them out there. You can find them online, right? But I had another CPA who had been through it and he had merged into a smaller firm. And I actually think that's a better advisor because I think there's two pieces to it. There's like the M&A guy who's like the deal guy, but then there's the person who has your best interest in heart. And I remember and I actually wrote an Accounting Today article on this and we can post it in the links. But I remember the very first conversation I had after I shared my financials and everything with Bill. And I said, Bill, what do you think my firm is worth? And he said to me, it's priceless because it's yours. And that never left me. And I think that's the part that you don't always think about, but truly it's priceless because you built it. And then you have to kind of get to, okay, what does the market say it's worth, et cetera, right?
Oh, 100%. But I do think, and as somebody that's done multiple acquisitions and been on the acquirer side, and by the way, what you mentioned about dealing with big firms and being interested, having bought a company from KPMG, that's a whole story we'll tell in the next episode. But the people is the most important thing. And your philosophical alignment, if you're a person that's staying, how do you really make sure that the place that you're looking is aligned with your values and the values of your team?
And it never dawned on me that I could write it into a contract to take care of them. And like one of the exit clauses, and this is something to know about, is like if you leave a lot of times, you can't take people. Like if you land somewhere and then you want to leave that company,
Non-solicitation.
you can't take your employees with you. Like we wrote it into my contract that if I left, my partner could come with me. Like that's brilliant. I would have never thought about that in my in my life, right? And I think and so having the attorney who's used to it, right? So important from an advisory standpoint, who can help you like, so, okay, you're aligned on values, but now, okay, how do you contractualize so that those values actually get put in the contract? And how do you think through what can be put in the contract so that at the end of the day, when the deal's done, everything's closed, and now you're trying to unpack things, you have it at the detail level of what should be in the contract as to what's going to stay and what's going to go, and like those are the things. Looking back now, I would say, okay, I would do a much better job getting a lot more specific than I did going in.
Yeah.
But you don't know that until you've been through it, right? Like, so I would say get that advisor and think about all the things that are really important to you and make a list of them. And then have your attorney work through how you can contractualize those important things too. And that will be taking care of your people ultimately too, because
Yeah.
that's saying who they're reporting to, who they're not reporting. Like all of that stuff, you can actually put that in a contract that I think most people don't realize can actually be put in a contract.
The lawyer, I can tell you anything can be put in a contract. I've even put an pig's head iron dinner belt into one, and I was riding around an orange bicycle from one. So I've put a lot into contracts. You put a lot in there, but I do think there are two things as we close and as we close out that I think are really important as we talk about M&A. Number one is when you negotiate, always do what you say you're going to do, period.
Mhm.
No matter what. following your word. I don't care who you're negotiating with and who you're negotiating against. Always do what you say you're going to do. And number two is think about the details and don't sacrifice details and quality for speed, because a lot of people get deal lock and they go fast when they should have just taken a little extra time. So with that, thank you for tuning in to the Accounting for Innovation podcast, brought to you by Decimal and the Radical CPA. You can find more insightful episodes of the Accounting for Innovation podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And please don't forget to pick up Jody's new book, Radical Pricing: How to Optimize Profits, Delight Clients, and Build a Top Value Firm. And Jody and I would both love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Thanks again.